Because if you do win this position, you would be working with two other railroad commissioners who are Republicans. So how do you feel like you'll be able to work with them and be able to influence policy when you're working with two other Republicans? Like, how do you feel about that? What would your approach be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that an individual commissioner has a huge amount of power, even though they would be the minority on the commission. So an individual commissioner can call for public hearings. Essentially, what the commission currently does is it rubber stamps most things. It puts them on the consent agenda. Everyone agrees. There's no public debate. There's no witnesses. There's no accountability. And one individual commissioner has a huge amount of power to put things on the agenda, on the public agenda, so that there's more discussion of what's going on and more accountability. The other thing an individual commissioner has the power to do is they have the power to direct commission resources to investigate certain things that are really important, or to look into issues that are of high public priority. For example, there was really uncommon or atypical price behavior. The prices of natural gas shot up 3,000% overnight during the winter storm, and there's been no investigation into whether or not there was market manipulation or price gouging or anything. And an individual commissioner could work to make sure that investigation happened. But then I think the other thing, so that's, talking about the power that an individual commissioner has. I think the second thing is that, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to find common ground on some of these issues, right? To your point, Texas oil and gas it is foundational to the Texas economy. It has created so many jobs, creates so many jobs. And I think that a lot of folks are aligned on a sort of vision of where the Texas economy needs to go, right? We need to continue to be the energy capital of the world, but make things cleaner and make sure that we're keeping our environment safe, and that we're also creating jobs for families across the state. And so I think there's a lot more common ground that can be found. And, I have a lot of experience working with people that, from different jobs, with people that disagree with me, and that's okay. And you figure out ways to work together. I think it'd be, looking forward to the opportunity and the challenge.
Right. Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you be in that opportunity and challenge, because I think like sometimes we forget that when we're in a room with people who don't always agree with us on everything, we do get challenged. And a lot of times in politics, especially, we come out with better policies. So, that's the thing about having two different points of view. When you only hear the same people talk, the policy doesn't always change for the better. It changes for the better when there's a little bit of tension and back and forth, and that sort of dialogue happening in order to think of people and what is in their best interests.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's something that, as I've traveled around the state, people, that resonates with Democratic voters, but Republican voters and independent voters as well, where people understand that the Railroad Commission hasn't been doing its job, right? And the idea of having somebody who has a slightly different opinion, who's going to maybe be a dissenting voice as a check and a balance on the organization, is appealing, regardless of what party you're from, regardless of what you think about outcomes. There's a real challenge and a real risk in groupthink and in people all agreeing all the time. And we saw the consequences of that groupthink this past February. And so I think having the opportunity to have somebody on the commission who's going to be a check and a balance on the people in power, I think honestly voters across the state are gonna find that appealing.
Yeah, I would agree. So what do you think, like going into 2022, what do you think is the most important responsibility of the Railroad Commission right now and looking forward in the future? What do you think is the most important responsibility?
Yeah, if I have to pick one, it's making sure that the lights can stay on and the heat can stay on in the winter. I think it is unconscionable to me. I'm thinking through all the different things that I would want to do here. But it is unconscionable to me that in the energy capital of the world in 2021, we couldn't keep the lights on and hundreds of people literally froze to death in their homes. That is just sitting with that for a moment is a lot. And so I think the number one priority of the Railroad Commission should be doing everything in their power to make sure that what happened last February never happens again.
That's great. So when you're going out on the road right now, Luke, and you're in rural Texas and you're in oil country and you're meeting people who own the oil fields and people in the industry, how do you feel you're being, what do you feel like your reception is right now in rural Texas and with some of these like business owners of the oil fields?
Well, I think a lot of folks, even in the oil and gas industry, look at the Texas Railroad Commission and they see commissioners who are not applying the regulations in fair ways or consistent ways, that are asleep at the wheel, that don't have vision about where the future of our economy is and what's happening. I think everyone knows that the world is changing, right? It's only my opponent is sort of like walking around talking like it's 1980, and it's like everyone else knows that things are changing, right? And I think there's a real opportunity. One of the reasons I'm running is because I want, and growing up, you talked about this a little bit in your introduction, but my dad was a CD store owner growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, right? I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, that he owned a CD store. I'd walk there after school every day. We'd get access to new CDs before they were released publicly. Like it was awesome. But then the economy changed, right? The internet was invented and file sharing was invented, and people stopped buying CDs. And my dad had to close his store. And he never, he was in his 50s. He never got a full-time job again after that. And I remember the impact that had on me. And I remember the impact that had on our family. And I think that I talk to folks working in the oil and gas industry, and they have some of the same concerns, right? And I understand those concerns. They're worried about the automation in the oil and gas industry. They're worried about the sustainability of oil and gas, the jobs longer term. They're worried about a lot of this stuff. And we've got a commission that is, one of the Railroad Commission's slogan is leading Texas energy. Because for a long time, they did do that. They were advocates for Texas energy leadership. And I think they've stopped doing that. And one of the things I want to do as commissioner is outline a vision for what it means for Texas to continue to be an energy leader for the next 100 years, just like it's been for the last 100 years. But the thing that's really important is that it's going to mean something really different in the next 100 years than it did in the last 100 years. And we need somebody who both understands where our economy has come from, but also where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, right now in Texas, like from our point of view, is that we really do need a vision for what energy is going to look like, because we know what energy looks like now, but we're diversifying energy within Texas with wind and with solar. And there's no reason why we can't continue to be an energy leader. I mean, through the years, we might see some oil fields dry up, but we also need to have plans for the people who own that land in order for them to be able to pivot into another energy industry, and to be able to train them and help them out and help them through that transition. And it doesn't mean that we're anti-oil and gas. It just means that we still want to be energy leaders, and we're just going to pivot a little bit. But really selling it, I think sometimes to rural Texas or to the oil parts of Texas is sometimes a hard thing to sell, because of the rhetoric that they tend to hear on the right. They kind of tend to think like, they tend to think that the left or anybody who's Democrat is anti-oil, which we're not. And especially our group, I mean, there's so many families across Texas that depend on oil to feed their families, so many people that are employed by the oil and natural gas industry. And, it's basically oil and gas. I mean, you can't think of Texas without it. It's like the backbone of our industry here in Texas. So looking forward, I would just like you to just sort of give a vision to us about what you think is going to happen in the next, let's say, 10 years, maybe up to 20 years ahead of time, because we're seeing global change coming in fast, and we are going to have to do pivoting a lot in the future. So what is your vision for just for Texas right now and the oil and gas industry, and how we should be looking forward?
Well, and I think there's a lot there in what you just said. And I think there's a few points I'd like to make. The first is that, as somebody that lives in this state that has such a rich history of energy leadership, and where oil and gas really has shaped not only the Texas economy, but our national economy, our global economy. Texas oil and gas has played such a central role for so long. I think that's something that national Democrats in particular miss, right? They don't understand, they don't appreciate that. And I think, frankly, a lot of times they're not thinking enough about how many jobs are created, about the people that actually work in the oil and gas industry who are going to be affected by the transition. And I think that sort of Washington national rhetoric doesn't make sense here. It doesn't work in Texas. I think the second thing I would say is that the framing of whether or not we're pro oil and gas or anti oil and gas, that framing is framing that Democrats should not accept, in my opinion. It is framing that Republicans have set up for years, because it clearly sets them up as being the pro oil and gas party and us as being the anti oil and gas party. Well, the reality is it's way more complicated than that. Even the most progressive climate scientists in the world don't look at, when we're looking at paths to net zero over from now to 2050, folks, none of those scenarios have us going to zero oil and gas production tomorrow. If we went to zero oil and gas production tomorrow, our entire economy and our entire energy ecosystem would collapse. So I think the idea of having a transition and a managed transition is incredibly important. And then to the last part of your question, in thinking about our vision, my vision for the future, I always like to use an analogy, which is that on the football team, on our football team of Texas Energy, oil and gas is clearly the quarterback, right? But you don't have a football team with 11 quarterbacks. We want to lead in wind and solar and geothermal, and we want to continue to be the home of innovation for across all different types of energy ecosystem, sectors. And I just think that's what we need to be doing. And so it's not just the idea that it's, we can lead in this or that is just like not correct. We should be leading in everything and pushing innovation in all of these sectors, making oil and gas cleaner and safer, but also making wind and solar and geothermal cheaper and more accessible, and having more, better battery infrastructure and building more transmission lines, like doing all of this different stuff that will help bring our energy ecosystem into the 21st century, because it's really not in a lot of ways currently.
Yeah. So what is your opinion about maybe like if we do become a leader in the industry, and what about us selling a lot of like solar and wind and whatever we have of oil and gas to other states to kind of help support them? Because I think that really does put us in a leadership space if we're able to possibly share a grid with other people, and as energy is fluctuating across the United States, be able to sell them energy instead of being our own little bubble. So
yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. something that, a lot of folks don't necessarily realize is that we've been leaders in wind energy for a long time, right? And one of the biggest challenges is not, in renewables in general, is not in Texas at least, is not the lack of places to build solar or new power, new wind turbines or anything, but it's actually the transmission, right? It's how do you get power from the places where it's generated, the places that are windy and sunny, to the places where people live, which are, a lot of times in big cities or on the coasts. And so that's one of the biggest challenges. I think that's something that is not directly within the mandate of the Railroad Commission. But when I think about what kind of investments do we need to make as a state, as a country over the next 10, 15, 20 years, I'm really excited about opportunities to try to build interstate transmission lines that can help move energy from places where it's generated to places where it's demanded or where it's consumed. And that's gonna benefit Texas and Texans, because it's gonna allow Texas producers to access even larger markets. So I think I'm really excited by that potential.
That's great. So I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and we'll open it up for Q&A for the last few minutes. But one of my last questions is, tell us about you, some of your experiences and maybe work experience, and then some of your values, because one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of times Republican candidates, they like to talk about their values all the time, but you know what? Democrats have values too. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and values?
Yeah, of course. So, and you talked about this in my intro a little bit. I don't know, happy to answer more questions about my experience, but I've worked mostly in the private sector, in tech and in energy consulting. I studied economics. The thing that I really, care the most about, and I was so shaped by my experience with my dad's CD store, right? But I care so much about economies and how our economies work, and whether, the types of jobs they provide for people, and whether or not those jobs can help folks put food on the table for their families. And so much of what I worked on was really shaped by that. And that's true. That was true in what I studied in graduate school. That was true in a lot of the work I've done. And I think it's just a sort of unifying principle throughout. I think throughout my career, I've also, I spent the last 2 years working at the Texas Democratic Party. Because I really do believe in trying to build democratic power in this state. I did a lot of voter registration work, because again, it's wild to me that in 2022, it's somehow partisan to want people to vote. Whereas I just think, everybody who's eligible should be able to vote, and do so easily. That doesn't, seem like it should be that offensive. But, really that work was so important, and the opportunity to try to help get other candidates elected, and bring into power some leadership across our state that actually has is putting the interests of Texans first. And that was, fundamental to the work I was doing the last couple of years. When you think about my values, I think two things really come to mind. One is the value of personal responsibility, right? Of taking responsibility for your actions and the impact that you have on the world. And the second is, the idea that we're supposed to look out for each other, and, neighborliness, and I guess maybe this is related, but it's a third one where we're supposed to leave the world better than we found it, right? My parents always taught me that growing up. And so when I look at the Texas Railroad Commission, which is, clearly not taking responsibility for its actions, and clearly not looking out for Texans, and clearly, they're supposed to be, another part of their mission statement is to be stewards of our natural resources. They're clearly not doing a good job at that. And so it really strikes to the core of who I am and what I stand for, that I want to run against them, that I'm running against them, and that I want to, replace them. And I think I can do a better job.
Well, you know what? I think you can do a better job too. And we definitely like your values. They're right with us as well. I mean, caring about other Texans should just be what we do every day. It's just part of being, it's part of being Texan. You
Yeah.
know, Texans care about Texan. We have some terminology and it's like being Texan nice, you know, being nice to everyone and being courteous. And that's been lost recently here in Texas. A lot of that's been lost, but hopefully we can bring it back again by electing some great people into offices like yourself. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience? Okay, Jody Johnson said that she is grateful that you are running.
Thanks, Jody.
Shout out to Jody. Anyone else? Give you guys a minute. So I have to tell you, so I met Luke the day you launched your commercial. You had a party that night, and that was like the first time that I met you, and I was just really impressed. And you were just riding high because your ad just came out and it was very impressive. So if anybody hasn't seen Luke's ad, please go look it up. I think it's on YouTube.
It is, and I'll pull up the Twitter link right now and drop it in my website.
Okay, that sounds good. So, you know, and speaking of YouTube, I don't know if anybody gets on YouTube that often, but there is an ad on YouTube from an oil company or natural gas company, basically singing Greg Abbott's praises. I think it's Calera or something like that. Does that sound familiar? I can't remember the exact name, but have you seen that ad, Luke, at all on YouTube?
I don't know. I haven't. I'm not familiar.
Okay, I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna send it to you. But yeah, there is an oil and gas company that that's talking about how Greg Abbott passed all of this stuff during the last legislative session and how he's been supporting them and how they're going to keep the lights on this winter and not disappoint. And it was kind of shocking because I was like, wait a minute, he didn't pass anything this last leg session. So this is a total lie. But so I just thought it was kind of interesting. It was something to look into. And I also thought it would be, I don't know, I'm going to look into it because I like to trace that money. I want to see where that money is going for sure.
Well, so, and it is wild that we are in a world where Greg Abbott is saying that he can guarantee the lights are going to stay on this winter, right? I mean, I don't know if anyone buys it, but I certainly don't. And I think he's just gambling, right? And he's gambling, but like he's gambling with the lives of Texans. And that is, you know, it's again, like unthinkable to me that he would be that flippant about it. And I'm sure, you know, if the power does go out, he's going to say, oh, I never said that. You know, they'll just pretend that it never happened. But, you know, we just deserve better, right? Like, I think we can ask for more from our public servants, right? Yeah. They're supposed to be public servants.
Yeah, they're supposed to listen to us. They need to be accessible and they need to listen to us. And there's supposed to be some kind of moral backbone, and that also seems to have been lost. You know, a moral compass, for example. So, okay, so Luke did post in the chat. He posted his video. So the video is in the chat. So please go and take a look at it. And then he also posted his website. And Luke, can you tell us a little bit about how we can help you right now while you're running for office? How can we best help you?
Yeah, for sure. You can, you know, obviously post about this, share the content we put out on Twitter, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and we're on TikTok now. And our TikTok is growing, which is astonishing to me. But you can go to lukewarford.com. You can sign up to volunteer. You can donate. Everything helps. Just absolutely, you know, so important. And yeah, keep following us along on social media, engaging. We love to hear from folks. I love the yay TikTok in the chat. I think we need to be communicating across platforms where voters are, and there are a lot of voters on TikTok and you know, other social media that maybe your average politician doesn't necessarily use that much. And I think it's one of the, we didn't talk much about this, but I think it's one of the strengths of me being a younger candidate and being able
Yeah.
to
So
speak.
let's talk about how you're a younger candidate, because I think that's another thing that we should talk about. You are a younger candidate, and you're, you know what, you're in great company. You're in really amazing, great company. I have never seen this many people running for office that have been younger candidates in Texas, like ever. It's been amazing to watch. I go in there and I'm like constantly updating my spreadsheet, and as like I'm seeing pictures of people who are running for office rolling in, it's been incredibly impressive. So there definitely seems to be a lot of synergy around the younger candidates right now, and we definitely want to promote that. A lot of the things that I don't know, I put it on Twitter today, is that we have a great field of awesome young candidates to choose from, and we should seriously look at electing them because you guys have experience, and you are educated and you have experience and you worked really hard and you deserve to win some of these positions. And then also it'd be great to have some new blood in the field. And if somebody says like, oh, you're not old enough, that we have to remember that Teddy Roosevelt, I mean, he became president, I think when he was like 44 or something, 42 or 44. And then John F. Kennedy, when he won his first session for Senate, he was 29 years old. Okay, so I think we could do a lot better by all of our young people running for office. We definitely could support you all and do our best by you. So I'm really excited about everyone who's running. Is there anyone who is running who's also a young candidate that you think is really awesome that you've met so far out on the campaign?
Oh my gosh, there are so many incredible young candidates across this state. I think and I can't speak for anyone else, but I can speak for me and say that one of the things that I think about in my decision to run for office is just the urgency of the issues that we're dealing with, right? And sure, there were maybe some people who said, well, have you considered waiting until you're older? Have you considered it? And it's like, yes, I've considered that, but I've also considered that there's a tremendous amount of urgency. These issues are too important to wait. And I want to fight for change, and I want to fight for better leadership now. And because that's what we need. That's what Texans need. We need improvements now. We don't need improvements in 5 or 10 or whatever, however many years. I think across the state, there's, too many good candidates to name. I think obviously Lena Hidalgo, Judge Hidalgo in Harris County is just like top of mind as a hero of mine. But there are countless candidates all over the state, in Travis County where I live, in Dallas, and everywhere. And so I'm really excited about the next generation of folks stepping up and taking on leadership positions. And I think it'll make our state better when a lot of these folks get elected.
Yeah, I completely agree 100%. Jody also says that she loved your Wordle yesterday, which was pretty awesome. I have to say, it was really clever.
Thank you. We try to have some fun. I really appreciate the thing about Wordle that I appreciate is that you can only play it once a day. Like that is because, if there was no limits on it, I'd get it. We have this addictive culture where you just nothing in moderation, right?
Right.
But I love that you're limited to only play it once a day. So it's sort of like a nice 5 or 10 minute break, whether I do it in the morning or during the day. And I'll take any opportunities to try to tell the story of the Railroad Commission, and using Wordle to do that seemed like a good approach. So thank you.
I loved it. It was fabulous. It's so fantastic. So anyway, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Luke, so much for spending this time with us. And I really appreciate everything that you've done. So, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. So I'm sure we'll be at an event or party soon.
Thank you all so much. Yeah.
Thank you.